My name is Robert Harrison, and at 84 years old, I thought I had seen everything life could throw at me. Born in 1939 in the heart of Detroit, I had survived the Great Depression as a child, served in Korea, built a successful automotive parts business, and raised 3 children who now lived scattered across the country. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what I would discover in my own Miami Beach condominium in the winter of 2023. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in February. I was sitting in my favorite leather recliner, the one my late wife Margaret had bought me for my 70th birthday, watching the sunrise paint the Atlantic Ocean in shades of gold and pink through my floor-to-ceiling windows. The view from the 32nd floor of the Ocean View Towers had been our dream retirement home, purchased in 2005 when we decided to leave the harsh Michigan winters behind. I reached for my morning coffee, expecting to find it on the mahogany side table where I always placed it, but my hand grasped only air. Confused, I looked around and found the cup sitting on the kitchen counter, still steaming. I could have sworn I had brought it to my chair, just as I had done every morning for the past 18 years. Margaret used to tease me about my rigid routines, calling me her creature of habit. Over the next few days, more peculiar incidents occurred. My reading glasses, which I religiously kept in the same spot on my nightstand, appeared in the bathroom medicine cabinet. The television remote, always placed on the coffee table's right corner, turned up wedged between the couch cushions. At first, I attributed these lapses to age. After all, 84 years had taken their toll on my body, so why not my mind? But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My monthly bank statement, which arrived like clockwork on the 15th of each month, showed a withdrawal I didn't remember making. $200 from the ATM at the public supermarket on Collins Avenue. I rarely used cash anymore, preferring the convenience and security of my credit card. The timestamp showed the transaction occurred at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday when I was certain I had been home, napping in my recliner. I called the bank immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed the familiar number I had memorized decades ago. The customer service representative, a young woman with a cheerful voice that reminded me of my granddaughter Sarah, assured me that the transaction appeared legitimate, my PIN had been used correctly, and the security cameras showed no signs of coercion. But I knew with absolute certainty that I had not made that withdrawal. The following week brought more disturbing discoveries. My prescription medication bottle, which should have contained 30 pills of my heart medication, held only 22. I counted them 3 times, my arthritic fingers carefully separating each small white tablet. Either I was losing my mind, or someone was systematically stealing from me. The thought of either possibility terrified me more than facing enemy fire in the frozen hills of Korea had 70 years earlier. It was during this time of growing paranoia and confusion that Maria Santos entered my life. She was recommended by the building's concierge, Mrs. Patterson, a stern woman in her 60s who had managed the Ocean View Towers for over a decade. "Mr. Harrison," she had said during one of our conversations in the marble-floored lobby, "you seem to be struggling a bit lately. Maria is wonderful. She's been caring for elderly residents in Miami Beach for 15 years. Very trustworthy, excellent references." Maria appeared at my door on a Monday morning in early March, carrying a small leather purse and wearing scrubs decorated with cheerful sunflowers. She was perhaps 45 years old, with kind brown eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her accent carried the musical cadence of her native Colombia, and when she smiled, I was reminded of the warmth Margaret had always shown to strangers. "Mr. Harrison," she said, extending her hand, "I'm here to help make your life a little easier." Initially, Maria's presence was a godsend. She arrived each morning at 8 o'clock sharp, prepared my breakfast exactly as I liked it: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast lightly buttered, and fresh orange juice. She organized my medications in a weekly pill dispenser, ensuring I never missed a dose. She cleaned my apartment with meticulous care, dusting the framed photographs of Margaret and our children that lined the mantelpiece, and she listened patiently as I told her stories about my younger days in Detroit's booming automotive industry. But even with Maria's help, the strange incidents continued. In fact, they seemed to accelerate. More money disappeared from my accounts, small amounts at first, $20 or $30 here and there, but gradually increasing to hundreds. My gold watch, a retirement gift from my business partners, vanished from my dresser drawer. When I asked Maria about it, she looked genuinely concerned and suggested I might have misplaced it during one of my confused moments. The phrase "confused moments" began appearing more frequently in our conversations. Maria would gently remind me that I had already taken my morning pills when I reached for the dispenser, or she would redirect me back to my bedroom when I wandered into the kitchen at night, claiming I had been sleepwalking again. Each incident was small, seemingly insignificant, but together they painted a picture of a man losing his grip on reality. One afternoon in late March, while Maria was in the kitchen preparing my lunch, I overheard her speaking quietly on her cell phone. She was speaking in rapid Spanish, but my years of living in Miami had given me enough understanding to catch fragments of the conversation. She mentioned El Viejo, the old man, and something about más dinero, more money. When she noticed me listening, she quickly ended the call and smiled brightly, asking if I needed anything. That night, lying in the darkness of my bedroom with the sound of waves crashing against the shore 32 floors below, I made a decision that would change everything. If someone was indeed stealing from me, and if that someone was using my supposed mental decline as cover, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would become the confused, helpless old man they believed me to be. The next morning, I began my performance. When Maria arrived, I greeted her with a blank stare, asking who she was and why she was in my apartment. The look of surprise that flashed across her face was quickly replaced by practiced concern. "Mr. Harrison," she said gently, "I'm Maria, your caregiver. We talked about this yesterday, remember?" I shook my head slowly, allowing confusion to cloud my features. "I don't remember," I whispered, and for the first time since she had started working for me, I saw something else in her eyes: calculation. Over the following days, I perfected my act. I would forget Maria's name, calling her by my late wife's name or the names of nurses from my brief hospital stay the previous year. I would ask the same questions repeatedly, expressing confusion about the day of the week or the year. I would wander around my apartment in my pajamas, looking lost and frightened. Each performance was carefully calibrated, convincing enough to be believable, but not so severe as to warrant immediate medical intervention. The transformation in Maria's behavior was swift and telling. Where once she had been patient and kind, now there was an undercurrent of impatience in her voice. She began speaking about me as if I weren't in the room, making phone calls to discuss the situation with someone she called me Amor, my love. She started arriving later and leaving earlier, claiming that I wouldn't notice the difference in my condition. But I noticed everything. I watched from behind half-closed eyes as she rifled through my desk drawers while I pretended to nap. I observed her photographing important documents with her phone: my social security card, bank statements, insurance policies. I saw her slip $20 bills from my wallet, always leaving enough so the theft wouldn't be immediately obvious. Each violation of my trust cut deeper than the last, but I forced myself to remain still, to continue the charade. 3 weeks into my deception, Maria made her boldest move yet. She arrived one morning with a man she introduced as her nephew, Carlos. He was perhaps 30 years old, with the lean build of someone who worked with his hands and eyes that never quite met mine. "Carlos helps me with heavy lifting," Maria explained as I stared at them with feigned confusion. "He's going to help organize your storage closet today." I watched from my recliner, maintaining my vacant expression, as Carlos and Maria systematically went through my belongings. They were looking for something specific. I could tell by the way they handled certain items with particular care. When Carlos picked up a small wooden box from the top shelf of my closet, I had to fight to keep my breathing steady. Inside that box were Margaret's jewelry pieces, including her engagement ring and the pearl necklace her grandmother had given her. "This is just costume jewelry," Maria said loudly, clearly for my benefit, as Carlos examined the contents of the box. "Probably not worth anything, but we should put it somewhere safe." They placed the box in a bag along with several other items: my father's pocket watch, a silver letter opener that had belonged to my grandfather, and a small collection of rare coins I had inherited from my uncle. All items of significant monetary and sentimental value, now being stolen from under my nose. That evening, after Maria and Carlos had left, I sat in my darkened living room and wept for the first time since Margaret's funeral 5 years earlier. Not just for the stolen items, but for the betrayal of trust, for the violation of my home, and for the cruel irony that in pretending to lose my mind, I was discovering just how sharp and clear it still was. The anger that followed my tears was white-hot and purifying. I began documenting everything. Using a small notebook I kept hidden in my bedroom, I recorded every theft, every suspicious conversation, every moment of calculated cruelty I witnessed. I noted the times Maria arrived and left, the phone calls she made, the items that disappeared. I even managed to photograph some of the evidence using my smartphone, a device Maria assumed I was too confused to operate properly. The most heartbreaking discovery came in early April. While pretending to be asleep in my recliner, I overheard Maria on the phone with someone, discussing plans to have me declared incompetent. The family never visits, she was saying in Spanish, and the building manager already thinks he's losing it. A few more weeks of this, and we can get power of attorney. Then we'll have access to everything. The realization that this wasn't just theft, but a systematic plan to take control of my entire life, filled me with a cold determination I hadn't felt since my business days. These people weren't just stealing my possessions, they were stealing my autonomy, my dignity, my very identity. They were counting on my isolation, on the fact that my children lived far away and visited infrequently, on the assumption that an elderly man's claims would be dismissed as the ravings of a deteriorating mind. I began to plan my counterattack. First, I needed irrefutable evidence. I purchased a small digital camera online, having it delivered to my neighbor Mrs. Chen, an elderly Chinese woman who had been kind to Margaret during her final illness. I told Mrs. Chen I was planning a surprise for Maria, which wasn't entirely untrue. I set up the camera in my bedroom, hidden behind a stack of books, with a clear view of my dresser and closet. The camera captured everything. Maria going through my personal papers, photographing my financial documents, and even trying on Margaret's jewelry while I was supposedly napping. Carlos appeared twice more, each time leaving with bags full of my belongings. The most damning footage showed Maria coaching Carlos on what to say if anyone questioned their presence in the building. They were to claim they were helping the poor confused old man organize his things. By mid-April, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, photographs of missing items, video footage of the thefts in progress, and detailed notes of every conversation I had overheard. I had also done some investigating of my own, discovering that Maria Santos was not her real name. She was actually Maria Gutierrez, and she had been fired from 2 previous caregiving positions under suspicious circumstances. The hardest part of maintaining my deception was the isolation it created. I couldn't call my children without risking exposure. Maria monitored my phone calls, claiming she was helping me remember what I had discussed. I couldn't confide in my neighbors without potentially alerting Maria to my awareness. I was trapped in a prison of my own making, surrounded by people who believed I was losing my mind while I had never been more mentally acute. One morning in late April, Maria arrived with news that made my blood freeze. "Mr. Harrison," she said with false gentleness, "I've been talking to some people about your condition. There's a very nice assisted living facility in Homestead that specializes in memory care. I think it might be time to consider making some changes." The facility she described was over an hour away from Miami Beach, far from anyone who might recognize me or question my supposed condition. That afternoon, while Maria was in the kitchen, I managed to call my eldest son, David, in Chicago. I had to be careful. Maria was within earshot, and I needed to maintain my confused persona while somehow conveying the urgency of my situation. "David," I said, allowing my voice to quaver, "I'm scared. The lady here, she wants to send me away." David's response was exactly what I had feared, gentle reassurance that Maria was probably right, that maybe it was time to consider more appropriate care. The conversation with David crystallized my resolve. My own children, influenced by Maria's reports of my declining condition, were ready to sign away my independence. I realized that I was completely alone in this fight, that no one would believe an 84-year-old man's claims against a trusted caregiver without overwhelming proof. The evidence I had gathered would have to be presented perfectly, dramatically, and undeniably. I decided to set a trap. On a Thursday morning in early May, I told Maria that I was expecting a visit from my financial advisor, Mr. Peterson, the following Monday. This was true. I had called Peterson and asked him to come review my accounts, claiming I was concerned about some irregularities. What I didn't tell Maria was that I had also invited Mrs. Patterson from building management and had arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to be present as a witness. Maria's reaction to news of the financial advisor's visit was immediate and telling. She became agitated, asking repeatedly what Mr. Peterson would be reviewing and whether I had mentioned anything about missing money. When I maintained my confused act, claiming I couldn't remember why I had called him, she made several urgent phone calls in Spanish, speaking too quickly for me to follow completely but clearly discussing some kind of problem. Over the weekend, Maria's behavior became increasingly erratic. She arrived early on Saturday, claiming she needed to organize my financial documents to make things easier for Mr. Peterson. I watched through half-closed eyes as she frantically searched through my papers, clearly looking for evidence of her thefts. She even attempted to access my computer, not knowing that I had changed all my passwords weeks earlier. Sunday night, I barely slept. Tomorrow would be the culmination of months of careful planning and painful deception. I would either expose Maria and reclaim my life, or I would find myself committed to a memory care facility, my claims dismissed as the paranoid delusions of a senile old man. The weight of what I was about to attempt pressed down on me like the humid Miami air before a thunderstorm. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast, with storm clouds gathering over the Atlantic. Maria appeared at my door earlier than usual, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by nervous energy. She had brought Carlos with her again, claiming he was there to help move some furniture. But I could see the tension in both their faces, the way their eyes darted around my apartment as if looking for escape routes. At exactly 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Mr. Peterson's familiar figure, along with Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen. Maria rushed to answer the door, putting on her most professional smile. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Mr. Harrison is having one of his confused days, but he's been looking forward to your visit." She ushered them into my living room, where I sat in my recliner, staring blankly ahead with the vacant expression I had perfected over the past 2 months. Mr. Peterson, a distinguished man in his 60s who had been managing my finances for over a decade, approached my chair with genuine concern. "Robert," he said gently, "how are you feeling today?" I looked up at him with no recognition, then turned to Maria with apparent confusion. "Who is this man?" I asked in a quavering voice. "Why is he in my house?" Maria quickly stepped forward, her hand on my shoulder in a gesture that now felt like a shackle. "This is Mr. Peterson, your financial advisor," Maria explained patiently, playing her role perfectly. "You called him because you were worried about your money, remember?" She turned to Peterson with a sad smile. "He's been having more and more episodes like this. Yesterday he accused me of stealing his watch, but we found it in his sock drawer where he had hidden it himself." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that I almost admired her skill, even as rage burned in my chest. But my moment was coming. After months of careful planning and painful deception, I was about to reveal the truth that would change everything. "Mr. Peterson," Maria continued, her voice dripping with false concern, "I've been documenting his episodes. Just last week, he forgot my name completely and accused me of being a burglar. The poor man even called the police on me." She pulled out a small notebook from her purse, one I had never seen before. "I keep track of everything for his family's sake. They're so worried about him." The audacity of her lies was breathtaking, but I remained motionless, playing my part to perfection. Mr. Peterson nodded sympathetically, his experienced eyes taking in my apparent condition with professional concern. "Robert, I'm here because you called about some irregularities in your accounts. Do you remember what specifically worried you?" I stared at him blankly, then looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "Accounts?" I mumbled, allowing drool to form at the corner of my mouth. "I don't understand. Where am I?" The performance was Oscar-worthy, and I could see Maria relaxing slightly, believing her deception was working. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, her stern demeanor softened by what she believed was witnessing an elderly man's decline. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Mrs. Patterson from Building Management. We've spoken many times over the years." I looked at her with the same vacant expression, then suddenly became agitated. "I want to go home," I cried out, attempting to stand from my chair with shaky movements. "Where's Margaret? I want my wife." Maria immediately rushed to my side, gently pushing me back into the chair with practiced ease. "You see?" Maria said to the assembled group, her voice heavy with manufactured sadness. "This is what I deal with every day. He thinks his wife is still alive, he doesn't recognize familiar faces, and he gets confused about where he is. Yesterday, I found him trying to leave the building in his pajamas, claiming he needed to go to work." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, a masterful touch that made Mrs. Chen gasp in sympathy. Carlos, who had been standing quietly in the corner, suddenly spoke up. "Tia Maria is right. My aunt has been so patient with him. She even uses her own money sometimes to buy his groceries when he forgets to give her cash." The lie was so brazen, so perfectly coordinated with Maria's story, that I almost broke character. Instead, I let out a confused whimper and reached for Maria's hand like a frightened child seeking comfort. Mr. Peterson opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. "Well, regardless of Mr. Harrison's current state, I need to address these financial concerns. There have been numerous unauthorized withdrawals from his accounts over the past 3 months. Small amounts initially, but they've been increasing. He spread the bank statements across my coffee table, pointing to highlighted entries. Someone has been systematically draining his accounts. Maria's face showed just the right amount of shock and concern. Oh my goodness. Mr. Peterson, I had no idea. Poor Robert must be so confused about his money. Sometimes he gives me cash for groceries and then forgets, accusing me of stealing. Could he be taking money out and forgetting about it? Her performance was flawless, but I noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for one of the bank statements. That's certainly possible, Mr. Peterson replied, though his tone suggested skepticism. However, the pattern is quite sophisticated. The withdrawals are always made at times when Mr. Harrison would typically be napping, and they're from ATMs he's never used before. It suggests someone with intimate knowledge of his daily routine. His words hung in the air like an accusation, and I saw Carlos shift uncomfortably near the window. Mrs. Chen, who had been quietly observing from her position near the door, suddenly spoke in her heavily accented English. Mr. Harrison, you remember me? Mrs. Chen from apartment 3208? You helped me with groceries last month. I looked at her with apparent confusion, then my face lit up with false recognition. Margaret? Margaret, is that you? You look different. Did you change your hair? The pain in Mrs. Chen's eyes was genuine as she witnessed what she believed was my mental deterioration. This is exactly what I mean, Maria said, seizing the moment. He confuses everyone with his late wife. Last week, he called me Margaret for 3 straight days. The doctor says it's a common symptom of advancing dementia. She turned to Mr. Peterson with a look of determination. Perhaps it's time to consider having me appointed as his financial guardian. I could protect him from making these confused withdrawals. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. This was at the moment I had been dreading and preparing for. Maria was making her final play, attempting to gain legal control over my finances while I sat there, supposedly helpless to stop her. Mr. Peterson frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion. That's a significant step, Ms. Santos. It would require medical evaluation and court approval. Of course, Maria replied smoothly. I've already spoken with Dr. Rodriguez at Miami General about Robert's condition. He's willing to conduct a competency evaluation. Given Robert's obvious decline in his family's absence, I believe it's the most compassionate solution. She pulled out her phone, as if to make the call immediately. I could arrange for the evaluation as early as tomorrow. This was my moment. After months of careful planning, meticulous evidence gathering, and painful deception, the time had come to reveal the truth. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. Everything depended on the next few minutes. I slowly raised my head, and for the first time in months, my eyes were clear, sharp, and completely lucid. That won't be necessary, Maria, I said in a strong, steady voice that cut through the room like a blade. The transformation was instantaneous and dramatic. Maria's face went white, Carlos dropped the picture frame he had been examining, and Mrs. Patterson gasped audibly. Mr. Peterson's eyes widened in shock, while Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly. She had suspected something all along. Mr. Harrison? Mr. Peterson stammered, his professional composure shaken. You seem different. I stood up from my chair with none of the shakiness I had displayed moments before, my posture straight and commanding. I seem lucid, you mean? That's because I am, and I have been this entire time. Every confused moment, every episode of forgetfulness, every instance of calling Maria by my wife's name, it was all an act. Maria found her voice first, though it came out as a strangled whisper. Robert, you're having another episode. You're confused. Let me help you sit down. She reached for my arm, but I stepped away from her touch, my eyes never leaving her face. The only confusion here, Maria, or should I say Maria Gutierrez, is how you thought you could steal from me and get away with it. The use of her real name hit Maria like a slap. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by the calculating expression I had observed so many times while pretending to sleep. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Carlos had moved closer to the door, clearly preparing to flee, but Mrs. Patterson had positioned herself to block his exit. I walked to my bedroom, my movements sure and purposeful, returning with the small digital camera I had hidden for months. This device has been recording everything that happens in this apartment for the past 6 weeks. Every theft, every violation of my privacy, every moment of your betrayal. I connected the camera to my television, and the large screen filled with crystal-clear footage of Maria rifling through my personal papers. The room fell silent as we watched Maria on screen, photographing my financial documents with her phone. The timestamp showed the date and time clearly, and her actions were undeniable. "This was taken 3 weeks ago," I narrated, "while you thought I was napping in my chair. You spent 47 minutes going through my private papers, taking pictures of everything from my social security card to my insurance policies." The next clip showed Carlos in my bedroom, carefully removing items from my dresser and placing them in a bag. Margaret's jewelry box was clearly visible among the stolen goods. "And here's your nephew Carlos, stealing my late wife's jewelry. Items that have been in my family for 3 generations, reduced to mere merchandise for your criminal enterprise." Carlos's face had gone ashen, and he was now openly looking for an escape route. But the most damning footage was yet to come. The screen showed Maria on her phone, speaking in rapid Spanish about El Viejo Loco, the crazy old man, and discussing plans to have me declared incompetent. The audio was clear enough that even those who didn't speak Spanish could understand the malicious intent behind her words. "You were planning to steal my entire life," I said, my voice heavy with controlled anger. Mr. Peterson had recovered from his initial shock and was now taking notes furiously. "Mr. Harrison, this is incredible evidence of elder abuse and financial fraud. We need to contact the authorities immediately." He pulled out his phone, but I held up my hand to stop him. "There's more, Mr. Peterson. Much more. I've documented every theft, every lie, every moment of this elaborate deception." I retrieved the notebook I had kept hidden, its pages filled with meticulous records of Maria's crimes. March 15th, Maria took $60 from my wallet while I pretended to nap. March 22nd, she removed my father's pocket watch from my dresser. April 3rd, she coached Carlos on what to say if questioned about his presence in the building. Each entry was dated, timed, and detailed with the precision of a man who had spent his career in business. Maria finally found her voice, though it came out as a desperate plea rather than the gentle tone she had used for months. "Robert, please, you don't understand. I was trying to help you. You were so confused, so vulnerable. I was protecting your money, keeping it safe." The lies continued to flow, but now they sounded hollow and pathetic in the face of overwhelming evidence. "Protecting my money?" I laughed bitterly. "By stealing it? By planning to have me declared incompetent so you could gain power of attorney? By isolating me from my family and friends?" I turned to address the room. She monitored my phone calls, intercepted my mail, and systematically convinced everyone that I was losing my mind. It was a masterful plan, I'll give her that. Carlos suddenly bolted for the door, pushing past Mrs. Patterson with surprising force. But Mrs. Chen, despite her small stature and advanced age, stuck out her foot and sent him tumbling to the floor. "You no run from what you do," she said firmly, standing over him with surprising authority. "You stay and face consequences like man." The sight of the elderly Chinese woman subduing a man half her age would have been comical under different circumstances. Mr. Peterson was already on the phone with the police, providing them with my address and a brief summary of the situation. "Yes, we have evidence of systematic elder abuse and financial fraud. The perpetrators are still on the scene." He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Robert, what you've done is remarkable, but it was also incredibly dangerous. What if they had become violent?" "I considered that possibility," I replied, "but I knew that violence would have exposed their scheme. They needed me alive and apparently incompetent to make their plan work. Besides," I smiled grimly, "I may be 84, but I'm not helpless. I still have the .38 revolver I carried in Korea, and I remember how to use it." The revelation that I was potentially armed seemed to drain the last of the fight out of Maria and Carlos. Within minutes, the apartment was filled with police officers, paramedics, and detectives. Detective Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, took charge of the scene. "Mr. Harrison, I have to say, this is one of the most elaborate undercover operations I've ever seen from a civilian. You've provided us with enough evidence to put these people away for a very long time." She gestured to Maria and Carlos, who were now in handcuffs. As Maria was led away, she turned back to me with a look of pure hatred. "You think you're so smart, old man, but you're still going to die alone in this place. Your children don't care about you, your wife is dead, and now you have no one. Her words were meant to wound, but they bounced off me harmlessly. I had faced down my demons and won. Actually, Maria, I said calmly, I'm not alone. I have my dignity, my independence, and my self-respect, all things you tried to steal from me but failed. And unlike you, I'll be sleeping in my own bed tonight, not in a jail cell. The satisfaction of seeing her face crumble at my words was worth every moment of the deception I had endured. Detective Martinez spent the next 2 hours taking my statement and reviewing the evidence I had compiled. Mr. Harrison, your documentation is better than most police investigations. You've recorded dates, times, amounts stolen, and even photographic evidence. This is going to make our job much easier. She paused, studying me with professional curiosity. What made you decide to fake dementia instead of just calling the police? Who would have believed me? I replied. An 84-year-old man claiming his trusted caregiver was stealing from him? Without proof, it would have been my word against hers, and she had already begun establishing a pattern of my supposed mental decline. I needed irrefutable evidence, and the only way to get it was to let her think she was succeeding. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Maria and Carlos's operation. They had been targeting elderly residents throughout Miami Beach, using the same pattern of establishing trust, documenting supposed mental decline, and then systematically stealing from their victims. I was their most ambitious target, but I was also their downfall. The evidence I provided led to the discovery of at least 6 other victims. 3 weeks later, I sat in the same leather recliner where this whole ordeal had begun, reading the morning newspaper. The headline read, "Elderly Man's Elaborate Sting Operation Exposes Caregiver Fraud Ring." The article detailed how my months-long deception had led to the arrest and conviction of Maria Gutierrez and Carlos Mendez, along with 3 other accomplices who had been part of their criminal network. My phone rang, and I was surprised to hear my son David's voice on the other end. "Dad, I just read about what happened. I can't believe you went through all of that alone. Why didn't you call us?" His voice was filled with guilt and concern. "Because you wouldn't have believed me either," I replied gently. "Maria had done her job too well. Even you were ready to put me in a memory care facility based on her reports." "I'm flying down this weekend," David said firmly. "We need to talk, and I need to see for myself that you're okay. I'm also going to look into getting you better security, maybe a different caregiver if you still need help." I smiled, touched by his concern but also amused by his assumption that I needed help. "David, I've been taking care of myself just fine. But I'd love to see you. It's been too long." The legal proceedings took several months, but the outcome was everything I had hoped for. Maria Gutierrez was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Carlos Mendez received 6 years for his role in the scheme. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Williams, commended my courage and ingenuity during the sentencing hearing. Mr. Harrison's actions not only protected himself but potentially saved other elderly victims from similar exploitation. I recovered most of my stolen property and money, though some items, including Margaret's pearl necklace, were never found. The insurance company, initially skeptical of my claims, paid out in full after reviewing the video evidence. More importantly, I had reclaimed my independence and proven to myself and others that age doesn't necessarily mean vulnerability. As I sit here now, 6 months after the dramatic confrontation in my living room, I reflect on the lessons learned from this experience. I discovered that I'm stronger and more resourceful than I had given myself credit for. I learned that trust, once broken, leaves scars that never fully heal. But most importantly, I proved that sometimes the best defense against those who would prey on the elderly is not to appear weak and helpless, but to be smart, patient, and prepared. At 84 years old, I may have gray hair and arthritic hands, but my mind is as sharp as ever, and I'm not ready to be anyone's victim. The view from my 32nd floor window is still beautiful, the sunrise still paints the ocean in gold and pink, and I still drink my coffee from the same spot every morning. But now I do it with the satisfaction of knowing that I fought back against those who tried to steal not just my money, but my dignity, and I won. This was another incredible story from our channel. Life teaches us that it's never too late for justice, revenge, or redemption. Each story you heard here is real, lived by people who found strength when everyone thought they were defeated. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in this situation? Your opinion matters to us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our emotional stories. We have new tales of courage, revenge, and overcoming every week. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to fight for what's right. Sometimes, the best revenge is living well and proving that age is just a number. Thank you for being part of our community. Until the next story, remember, every ending can be a new beginning. Subscribe, like, and comment. See you in the next video.